Hello, I'm James Pansarasa, Chief Architect here at Mill5. Today I want to talk to you about controlling cost in the cloud. The adoption of cloud computing is continually growing, and so are the costs of the enterprise. But without good guidance, controlling cost is difficult or impossible for most organizations. When surveyed, controlling cost was the number one challenge identified by nearly everyone using the cloud. I'm going to give you some places to identify where you might be spending too much, some ways of improving your efficiency today, and some ideas of where you might want to be doing things in the future. It's no surprise that adoption is on the rise for enterprises with all cloud vendors. We can see that AWS is the largest vendor with 1/3 of the market share. Azure is second with around 18% and gaining. And Google Cloud Platform is third with about half the size of Azure, or 9%. There are many other players making up the majority of cloud vendors, but they start to fall into niche categories. And the adoption of cloud resources may be accelerated by COVID-19, with respondents to a recent survey saying that 60% of their usage was higher than expected during the pandemic, and many expecting their usage to remain high when it ends. Most enterprises have a hybrid approach to the cloud. A mix of private and public cloud is common, with most companies maintaining some resources on-premise or in a data center while migrating some workloads to a public cloud vendor. Many companies try many cloud vendors when starting their journey, but very few companies adopt a multiple public cloud approach in the end, less than 5%. Many organizations see their spend on the public cloud infrastructure rising over the next 12 months. Some estimates see this growth as much as 47% over the previous year. Yet often the budget for cloud resources exceeds expectations. On average, this can be 25% or more over budget. And respondents to a recent survey say that close to 1/3 of this spend is identified as waste. So, how does an enterprise then migrate more workloads to the cloud while staying within budget and minimizing waste? First, it's okay to have these problems. It's hard to know the full cost of cloud adoption up front. And while each vendor has tools for cost planning, these tools are hard to understand and harder to use. Microsoft has a whole course and certification on how to use their cost planning tool. And post-spend cost analysis tools from each vendor can tell you where you're spending your money, but not often why. And without proper planning, these cost analysis tools don't help you trace back your spend to the deployment that initiated the problem in the first place. What is often the simplest path to adoption is not the cheapest. Moving VMs to the cloud is one of the most attractive ways of migration, but it's also one of the most expensive ways to run a workload in the cloud. Migrating your data to the cloud can eat up budget without proper curation, because we all know that data only grows over time, and some enterprises end up being data hoarders. Also, the cost of networking can be opaque, and it's easy to end up with unintentional spend on networking alone. Some simple and easily overlooked configurations can end up bleeding costs over the long term. Let's be clear, everyone is responsible for controlling costs. Managers own the budget, architects own the design, and developers own the implementation. These three groups need to work together, and so no one is surprised when the bill comes in the end. And this is not a one-time event. It's a process that should be refined over time. There are things that you can do to address these problems. I'll talk about some of these today. Make sure your spend is on the right compute resources and they're right size, and you're using the right technology. Take advantage of different storage options your cloud vendor provides for your data. Ensure you understand your network topology when you deploy to the cloud, and stop deploying and configuring your workloads by hand. And a little planning up front can pay dividend over the long term. Let's dive a little deeper into each one of these topics. First, make sure you're using your compute resources effectively. Migrating VMs to the cloud is made simple by every vendor, but this is often the most expensive proposition. There are very few easy things that everyone will tell you, like right sizing your virtual machines or reserved instance pricing and turning off your VMs when not in use. But did you know that your Microsoft licenses for Windows Server and some applications extend to workloads run in the cloud? Did you know you may be paying twice for your Windows licenses? These optimizations take little effort, and you might not need to engage a smart systems integrator like Mill5 to start seeing these benefits from these small improvements. But really, you should start consider moving to higher density compute resources like containers to further reduce your spend. Migration from server VMs to containers takes some effort from your developers and will change your deployment, but this can pay dividend over time. Linux containers are inexpensive and scale very well, but not every server workload runs on Linux, and even the ones that can may introduce subtle bugs if you don't know what to look for during your container migration. Windows containers can fill a gap in your containerization journey, but they introduce other issues, complexity, and don't offer the same cost benefit as Linux-based containers, but they can be an option for some. And containers are not little VMs, and treating them as such is missing the point of containerization, so some education is required. Ideally, platform as a service offerings can be very efficient, but it takes significant design and development effort to take advantage of these offerings. Like on-demand containers for tasks that run to completion then turn off are useful. The serverless compute services of AWS Lambda, Azure Functions, or Google Cloud Functions can be triggered by many different types of events, and they can replace even more VMs and containers. But there's often no lift and shift from these platform as a service technologies, so you will have to design and plan to use these services, but the investment can be the most efficient use of cloud resources for the money you spend. Let's talk about consuming storage smartly. Your data has gravity. Compute needs to be close to your data, but choosing the right data storage can make the difference between an efficient spend and uncontrolled waste. Considering data always grows over time, managing your cloud data and access technology is a pillar of good cloud adoption plan. The first place to optimize is to move away from your VM-hosted SQL databases to cloud-hosted instances. Sometimes these hosted versions don't have the same feature parity as your on-premise instance, so you should weigh the cost of migration against the cost of the feature that you're using. Migrating to an open source database such as PostgreSQL from SQL Server or Oracle can provide better cost effectiveness, but will require an investment and training and some development effort. There are also many NoSQL and non-relational storage options that provide very cost-effective solutions for large data sets. Storage in the cloud is always cheaper than compute, and by removing the SQL engine, data access can become cheaper. These NoSQL options will require architecture and development effort to adopt, and these services are often not simple ports from your relational databases. These can be used in conjunction with relational databases, so you can migrate over time. Efficient networking is not an accident. Cloud networking is often overlooked and can be a hidden cost in cloud deployments. In a hybrid scenario where your compute is in the cloud and your data is on premise, the cost of network access could skew any cost efficiency and impact performance. VPNs and public networking are metered services, so monitoring and optimizing your network is a key to a good deployment. You should be aware of the cost of networking between different regions or availability zones within your cloud vendor. You are often not charged for traffic between machines or services in the same region, but you will be when it crosses these regions or availability zones. Understanding the cost of networking can shape different deployment scenarios. Also, if you're not careful, traffic between your regions, within the same cloud vendor, might end up routed over the public internet rather than the vendor's networking backplane, not only costing you double, but exposing your traffic along the way. Let's talk about adopting DevOps. If you're deploying your workloads or creating your services through a cloud vendor's portal, please stop. Doing things by hand may be convenient when you're doing a proof of concept, but it's an awful practice to continue. And having the DevOps practice may have been a luxury before, but it's a key to a successful cloud adoption. DevOps always allows you to quickly deploy, update, or delete your cloud services. And also treating your deployments as code means you have repeatability and you can optimize your process over time. And DevOps is the easiest way of adding metadata to your deployments. This metadata is really useful in decoding and where you spend your money. Without traceability from your metadata, you might be guessing where the money went when the bill comes due. And last, cloud architecture is different. If you were born in the cloud, this is not new to you, but for those of you who have had the cloud thrust upon them, this can be seen as daunting. Designing an application for the cloud is different. There are a lot of design options not available to you on premises. These new technologies and techniques can make your traditional applications more cost effective and scale better. And consuming platform as a service offerings from your cloud vendor is where you can really save the most. These are shared resources, but often pay as you use services, so they are very effective. To sum it all up, make sure you're using compute and storage and networking efficiently. Invest in redesigning your applications for the cloud, and that can pay dividends. And leveraging DevOps and cloud architecture can be the difference between good and great cloud adoption. This is the kickoff of our cloud series. I hope you enjoyed this talk. If you did, please share and subscribe. In the coming weeks, I'll be diving deeper into each of these topics. And if there's anything you want to hear me talk about, please leave a comment or send us an email. And as always, you can find us on the web at mil5.com. Please feel free to schedule a session with us in the link seen on the screen or on our website. Thanks, and see you again soon.